Good evening and welcome to the Global Business Talk Show. My name is Jeanne Saint-Fleur. We bring you the expert to talk to you about what's going on in the community. We bring you the expert to talk to you about what concerns the community. We are already in April and this is not April Fool. April is the National Sexual Assault Awareness and Child Abuse Prevention Month. Today we will have a very, very intense conversation with Miss Cherie. Good evening, good morning. Greeting, Miss Cherie. How are you?
Hi, DJ. So glad to be here.
We know that April is a very, very important month, and many in the community are thinking about autism and other awareness month. But tell us a little about your organization and what you do in the community.
Okay, thanks so much. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about April, because you brought that up and that's really important. So April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month as well as Child Abuse Prevention Month. And it's a time for us to step back and celebrate keeping children safe and making it an active part of what we do as a community, as a society, as parents, as organizations. And it brings attention to topics that we don't usually talk about. But our mission at KidSafe Foundation is that we want to build strong, healthy, resilient families that take active steps to prevent their children from experiencing any kind of harm, particularly sexual abuse. Okay. And we do this through all sorts of activities and events and seminars and a website and education.
Would we say that sexual assault is a public health crisis?
Yes. So the CDC, thank you for bringing that up. The CDC literally came out not too long ago and said sexual abuse, child sexual abuse is a public health crisis that is preventable with primary education. And what I like to do is compare it to smoking. So many, many years ago, they declared, CDC declared that smoking is a public health crisis. And they came out with amazing campaigns, educational campaigns that swept across our nation. And next thing you know, we have a decrease in the habit of smoking. Believe it or not, child sexual abuse can be treated in a similar way. And it is through educating not after the problem, but even preventing before the problem.
Now, since it's a public health crisis, share with us some numbers, because I read somewhere that we have, and it really captured my attention. It says that there are 4.8 million adults that are trafficked for forced sexual exploitation. But there's 1 million children that are trafficked for commercial sexual exploitation.
Yeah, there are a lot of statistics out there. So let me start with the child sexual abuse statistics. Okay, so a little different than trafficking. So 90% of the time a child is harmed sexually, it is by someone they know and trust. It is a family member. It is a community member, it is a neighbor, it's a friend, it's a teacher, it's a preacher, a tutor, a coach. And we need to take that in as a statistic, not just because it's a number, 90%, but we were raised with stranger danger. Be afraid of the person you don't know.
That's right.
And the reality is we need to be aware that and we can't prevent something if we don't recognize it's happening right under our noses by someone we trust. So 90% of the time by someone we trust. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys will be sexually abused by the age of 18. If we said the same statistics, so it's really 1 in 10 children by the age of 18, we're going to get cancer. People would be marching on Washington. They would be angry and they would be saying, research, 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 prevent, prevent, prevent. And once again, sexual abuse, like a silent epidemic, not many people are holding the flag for that. And that's what we do.
Could it be because there's a lack of education? And I think that's where your organization comes in. How important it is for a community, because though we look at it as a public health crisis, but it's also a conversation crisis. How do we talk to our children? Because we took the age of 1 to 18, which is when a child is really the responsibility of the parent. How can a parent speak to the children about that, considering that it's not the cancer and we could go to Washington and start marching?
That's right. That's right. So there's a whole conversation that we're going to have, I think I'm going to say a little bit later, about how we can teach our children safety skills that can help them. But before we start talking about what to say to the children, I want to talk a little bit more about the statistics and why it's important that we understand sexual abuse ourselves for ourselves. And one of the other statistics is that in the United States, there are over 42 million adult survivors of child sexual abuse. They're our friends, they're our family members, they're our coworkers, they're our neighbors, they're the people we're passing when we're food shopping in the local store. Yet we don't know that because we don't talk about it. And so these people who, including myself, who is a survivor, who has gone through this experience and now is raising children, or is an auntie or an uncle to children, or is a grandparent at this point, whatever happens in our past has impact on our present and how we raise our children. So understanding how prevalent this problem is, how big this problem is, and how it impacts our relationships, our long-term health, our education, everything. It impacts our entire lives. Once we grapple a little bit with that and our how we were raised, like I was raised in a house where you didn't talk about that. You just didn't. So I didn't tell anybody till I was way older. And most people, according to the research, never tell.
And is it why we will say that this is a silent killer? Because we don't talk about it. And I would even go further, being from a Caribbean country, that we feel as though if we were to talk about it, no one will believe us. Because when you look at the numbers, because the number is so big, it seems as if everybody around me, can you imagine 4 people that you know that you usually hang out with, your friends that you go have a drink or go to the movies with, each of them already experienced it, but none of us are speaking about it. So our silence is making it worse.
Yes, yes. And each, absolutely, our silence is making it worse. And each individual person experiences their abuse in a different way. And some people are going to end up turning to alcohol and drugs to numb the pain. Others might have a bunch of really, really bad relationships because of the feelings they have of lack of worth or shame. I mean, it can go a myriad of ways, but us becoming aware of how is this experience impacting our lives helps us propel forward and make change in our society, in ourselves first, and then in how we raise our kids. Because if we don't come to grips with it ourselves, that cycle of abuse goes over and over and over.
I have a very good friend of mine, and usually when we talk about things like that, because it is considered a taboo conversation, it is considered something that is making people very uncomfortable. So then, although we started talking, we spoke about the awareness, we spoke about the statistic. I want to point blank ask you, what is child sexual abuse? How would you define it so that any of our viewers, whether they speak Creole, whether they speak English, whether they read the subtitle, how do we as Americans see child abuse?
Okay, no, that is such a fair question, because sometimes we assume that people understand what it is, and it can mean different things to different cultures. So here in the United States, we define it as, and I'm going to make this very simple terms because we can talk a whole hour about this in and of itself, is when a person, and that could be an adult, that could be a teenager or another child, touches, well, doesn't have to be only touching, but I'm going to talk about that in a second, a child sexually for their own pleasure.
Okay.
That's a very simple description, but it's also non-touching behaviors. So it could be a person touching a child over their clothing. That is sexual abuse. You do not have to have, I don't know what I'm allowed to say on the program or not, but you do not have to have penetration for it to be sexual abuse.
That was going to be my real
Yes.
hammer on the nail.
Yeah.
If there's no penetration, can there be sexual abuse without penetration? And
Absolutely.
I appreciate the fact that you said it doesn't have to be an adult. It could be a child. It could be somebody a little older than another person. But no penetration, there could still be
It is against the law.
Yes.
Sexual abuse, touching another person inappropriately for their sexual pleasure, it is child sexual abuse. If a teenager thinks it's funny to show their little brother or their little brother's friend some pornography online,
it's abuse.
That's abuse.
Yeah.
That's against the law. That's like reportable abuse.
So we're going to be clear about it. If a teenager chooses to display or show pornography to another child,
or
this
themselves,
is abuse. Or them,
yes.
Or even if they're showing their body to
Yes.
someone else,
Right.
it is considered abuse by law.
Correct.
So we know that exhibitionism, exposing oneself to a minor, funneling, obscene phone calls, and texts, and any kind of digital interaction. So that goes beyond bullying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So you could
Yes.
bully somebody verbally, but if you're showing them what you would do and showing them
Correct.
certain
It is
pictures, it would be sexual.
Absolutely. A person taking pictures of a child, inappropriate sexual pictures of a child, or to use for their own pleasure, that is sexual abuse. They don't have to upload it to the internet for it to be considered sexual abuse. That's a whole nother, once they upload it to the internet and now they're sharing, their term used to be called child pornography, and now it's called child abuse, child sexual abuse material, because they're certainly not, the children have nothing to do with this as pornography. They are being, abused. Every time that picture is shared, they are re-abused.
As you say that, I remember turning away a contract to do a website for somebody who wanted to display pictures of people in Haiti who were poor, but the kids were always naked. And to me, that child has no saying in the picture that is being taken. You're trying to show some kind of poverty, but think about that child. It doesn't have to be, oh, he's not feeling comfortable now. How will that child feel 20 years later when you pull that picture back?
Correct. So, and when I was doing this, I was waving my red flag. That's what I call waving my red flag. And you're absolutely right. And I'm so glad that you had that instinctual sensitivity, because some people think, oh, I'm going to post a picture of my kid in the bathtub. He's 2. Well, once you post it, it's online forever, and anyone can gain access to it, even if you think you have every privacy setting online. And there are people online who will take your picture and use it in ways that you don't want to think about.
That's
so
probably
we really have to think about what we post.
Yeah, and how it affects others.
Yes.
So we also spoke about the fact that most people who were abused by somebody they knew, somebody that was close to them. So what what do perpetrators of child sexual abuse, what do they look like?
Oh, such a great question. So there is no profile of what a child sexual offender looks like.
I like that.
But there are behaviors that we can look for. And often it's not what you think. And so often an offender will be amazing person, charismatic, popular in the community, or in the, in the local neighborhood or in the local church or in the local school, very helpful. Usually they put themselves in positions of responsibility and trust.
And even authority.
And especially authority, yes. And then they gain the trust of the adults around them. And then of course, they're gaining the trust of the children around them. But what I say to parents is, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Like, why does someone who is not the parent of a child want to spend more time with your child than you want to spend with your child?
Yeah, that is a sign. That's an indicator.
That's a red flag, And when I'm with a group, and I say to people, think about a big event that you go to, a family barbecue. Everybody. It could be a church fest, a church event, or those kinds of things where a big gathering is. Watch how people interact with each other. The adults, for the most part, are interacting with adults. But is there an adult or a teenager that prefers to be with the kids and really prefers their
company?
Yes, their company versus the adult company. Once again, that's a red flag. If someone's asking to spend private time with your child, let me take your child. Oh, I'm going to take them camping, or let me take them to the store. I'll buy them something nice. Let me tutor them for free. If you didn't ask for help, that's a red flag. And the most vulnerable population are single parents. Yeah,
indeed.
Especially because they're looking in a positive way. They're looking for a positive male role model for their children. And very often it's those boyfriends that work their way into their lives that end up abusing the children, the boys and the girls.
Yeah.
So we forget sometimes that the boys get abused. And I believe that we know the statistics are not perfect because most people never report, right? But I feel very strongly that there's a lot of underreporting for the boys because they even feel greater shame and blame, and that they're at fault for it, and that it makes them gay or something else, and they are less likely to report. So we need to talk to our boys as much as we talk to our girls.
And as you were talking, I was going to talk about the two S's, the secrets and the shame. So I would say the secret is due to the fact that the quote unquote, the predator, the person who's overly neighborly, who wants to do this and to do that, have some kind of, I don't want to say power, as a way to tell those children or young adults, we need to keep this a secret. So they create that intimacy with that child for that child not to report it. And we need to shift back to the parents and explain to the parents, not only you need to tell your children whatever you're experiencing, trauma or any kind of experience, you need to be able to share with me. And to that point, you were talking about the shame with the boys. Let's talk about the secret first.
So let's go for secrets first. So it is imperative that from a very young age, we teach children the difference between a good secret and a bad secret.
Yes.
I would like to wipe out secrets altogether, but we can't, because that's not going to go away. But there really is a difference, a very easy difference between the two. So we say to children, and any parent can teach this to a child from a young age. It's not a one-time conversation. It's an ongoing conversation. A good secret is a secret that has an ending to it. So it doesn't go on forever. You're not holding it in. When you're keeping the secret, you have certain feelings. Your feelings are either excited or honored or proud, or like, for example, your grown-up takes you to the store and they say, you get to pick out a present for your little brother for his birthday. but let's not tell him till next week when we give it to him.
That is a good
And-
secret because it
it's a
has
good
a
secret.
time frame.
Yes, and both people, the child that's keeping the secret and the adult who said keep the secret, are happy and excited about the secret. Okay,
And I
so
would-
yes, go ahead.
And I would even go further. That secret is going to be shared with that person that we're keeping the secret from eventually.
Yes,
So that
exactly.
it's a full circle.
It's going to be out. Yep.
Yes. Mhm.
Then a bad secret can be many different types of things. Sometimes it's direct. You better not tell. Okay, that's obvious, direct. But most of the time when a sexual offender is grooming a child to be abused, they don't have to be direct. What you said was spot on. They build this relationship over time with the child and the child's family, gaining trust. And then eventually the child is so confused and tricked by the person's behavior. They were so wonderful here. And then a week later when the abuse starts, or a year later when the abuse starts, which is even more confusing, they're like, oh, did I do something to deserve this? Is this my fault? He's saying it's because he loves me. All the different messaging, sometimes it's direct and sometimes it's indirect. But here's what we say about a bad secret. A bad secret is something that you have on your mind that feels like it has no ending. It makes you feel worried, heavy, scared, threatened, sad,
Shame.
embarrassed,
Shameful.
shame. And you don't know what to do with that. So we say to children, anytime you have a bad secret, anything at all that's on your mind that's weighing you down, that's the exact kind of secret you need to go to a trusted adult in your circle of safe adults and tell them about, because they can listen to anything.
I want to take an example for the audience. If you're a 14 or 15-year-old and you have a friend who's a little older, and when you hang out with that friend and probably with others, they offer you a beer, for example. When at your house, they don't offer you a beer. So if that offender, as I would call it, or her, will say, well, do they let you drink at your house? No. Well, I consider you an adult. So when you're with me, you're an adult. Here's a drink. By you taking that beer, not only you can't tell your parents ever, because even if you were 40, your parents will be mad to know that this person offered you a drink when you are not allowed. You will feel like there's something weighing on you because you will hear your parents say, oh, this guy was drinking and then he got into an accident. Drinking is so bad. So now you feel like, well, what would she say? What would my mom say if she found out that I'm drinking with that person? So this secret is just evolving into more secrets, and then that embarrassment keeps on growing. So this is a bad secret.
Right.
But as you say, secrets is a no-no.
So, but let me pick up on something you said, please. Secrets do compound. They get larger and larger, therefore harder to share.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like we as parents, and this is a cultural thing as well, we have to go back to when those kids are really young. And we have to change our mindset about what our kids are going to go through in life. Mm-hmm. And if our kids can't come to us to talk about the challenges that they're going to experience, and they are going to experience challenges, if they don't have that listening ear of their parents, if they know if they mention the word drink or beer or penis or any other word, and their parent immediately says, what?
Consider that.
We can't talk about that. Wash your mouth out. You're done. Then that child is going to go to their friends and the internet to get their information, which puts the children at risk of harm. So part of it is breaking some of those cultural taboos that we were all raised with. And that's where the real change begins.
I want to add something before we go to the shame. And it's something that as I'm talking to you that I realize that I've done, but that I created for my own child. They say that as a parent, you should create a safety net. And there should be at least two or three people that your child could go to when they cannot speak to you. And I remember in my case, when I had my first boyfriend, which I couldn't tell my mom, the person that I was able to go to was my godmother. And we have that relationship. And I vividly remember her saying, and I was 17, she says, if a boy wants to kiss you, you need to keep one eye open and one eye closed. And I realized that it was a safety net because it wasn't another adult telling me, oh, just go ahead and kiss him and just do whatever. So it was somebody who loved and wanted to protect me. And in my circle, when I was raising my young boy, my young man now, my sister was his safety. So whenever there's something that he felt like if he were to talk to me about, that he would be embarrassed or that I would punish or that I would just go crazy about as a Caribbean mother, he could always call Tati because Tati loves, but Tati protects as well. So Tati is not gonna have you go down the wrong path. I don't know much about if you could do that with grandma, but grandpa was good. So being able to create that environment for your child where if they cannot speak to you, because you have to understand that you're not going to be there forever. You could die. That child could be an orphan. Be able to set those parameters for your child to be able to speak to somebody. I think it's something that is very important as a parent to do.
So at KidSafe, in our programming, in our education for the children and for the parents, we talk about having a circle of safe adults. And we say, this is from a very young age. We start this with 4-year-olds.
Okay.
That every child, we do it, it's an activity, we draw a circle, they draw pictures, we label the pictures. Who are at least, like you said, 3 adults that you could go to talk about anything, happy or sad, scary, funny. Who would you go to talk to? And we begin to train them that it could be your family member in terms of your mom or your dad. It could be a grandparent, an aunt. It could be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it could be a godparent, like you said. And so every year we recommend from a parent point of view, every year you should revisit that conversation with that child and then take the time to call those people and say, hey, Tati, you've been chosen to be part of my child's circle of safe adults. Here's what this means, you know, and we're working together to keep him safe, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And so now you're not only are you educating your child, you're educating your family. So, you know, this is our goal. Like that right there is our main goal.
Before we start talking about the programs and the services that you offer, let's go down a little talking about shame.
Sure.
And I think it's just the hardest thing because of what we just spoke about. It seems like the responsibility belongs to so many. You know, the parent, the single mom, the aunt who should be involved in the child's life, the government, the grandparents, the government, so many entities. How does that play in shame and people not reporting it?
Yeah. So shame, wow, such a topic. It's so heavy. Mm-hmm. Is really passed on generation to generation. And it could be about, just depending culturally how we were raised, it could be about anything. Mm-hmm. It could be, I'm ashamed because I have cancer. Mm-hmm. And that's how we used to think about it in the United States, not more than 20, 25 years ago. Yes. But it took a public health crisis of cancer to be recognized that it's not about shame. And we don't bring these things upon ourselves, mm-hmm. and that we can talk about it. So sexual abuse and sexual assault mm-hmm. is having a similar wave in our society here. And it's imperative that we teach children from a very young age that they should be proud of their bodies, right? Not even talking about abuse. Your body is special, belongs to you. And you start that type of talk from a very young age. But we as adults have to get rid of our own level of shame before we can pass it along. Because children are so smart. They read our body language. They listen to our tone of voice. If we're a little embarrassed even having the conversation, then they pick up on that. So I literally say, if this conversation about child sexual abuse, or teaching your children about healthy boundaries, or teaching your children about relationships or sexuality, if any of those things make you want to run out of the room and, you know, put your head somewhere else under a pillow, I understand, because we all have our history. Sure. But it's coming forward and facing some of that, because we as parents can all do a little bit better every generation to make it easier for our children and safer for our children. So the first thing I say about shame, in terms of feeling ashamed about our own bodies and not being able to even talk about it, is get in front of a mirror, literally, and say, penis, 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 vagina, 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 vulva, 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 elbow, 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 elbow. Or just say the words and take away all that heavy meaning, because they are body parts. And we have the right as adults to know the proper names for our own body parts. And children who know the proper names for their body parts, number one, are more respectful of their body parts. They're more responsible for their bodies, and they have healthier boundaries. And if something is wrong, they have a rash, it hurts when they go to the bathroom, they don't have shame about coming to their grown-up and saying, just like, Mom, I have a rash on my arm. They could say, Mom, I have a rash on my penis. And it doesn't have all that embarrassment and all that unnecessary feeling that blocks us from having these important conversations.
I call it an emotional burden, because if the child cannot express themselves and talk about what's hurting, it is an emotional burden. Right. So shame is one of those emotions that you could feel, whether you live in America, whether you live in Haiti, the Middle East, and we need to find a way as parents or as educators to create that trust for people to be able to tell us what's wrong. And as you were talking about rash, I wanted to ask you, what are the signs, physical, behavioral, or emotional? Because as I work also for the Chamber of Commerce, and even the business owners, we try to involve them into being able to notice or see if a child is coming into your office with somebody that they don't know, the way they behave. Can you notice it so that you could notify somebody? What are the signs? And I want to also talk about not only the physical, but specifically the emotional and the behavioral.
So great question. And I'm going to say that one of the things that KidSafe provides is called KidSafe for Parents 101. Okay. And we cover all of these types of questions in great detail, because that, once again, like, that could take a really long time. But I will say this: people assume there's going to be physical signs of child sexual abuse. And very often, more often than not, there are no physical signs. If someone's fondling a child, are there physical signs? No. If someone's showing a child pornography or taking pictures of a child to use in pornography, physical signs? No. Even if a child is, this is going to sound terrible, but I'm going to tell you anyway, even if a child is raped, our biological bodies are built to heal themselves. And if they don't go in immediately, if it's not reported till a year later, a month, even a week later, and they actually go in for an examination,
there's no sign.
There could be the possibility that there's absolutely no signs. So we have to depend on behavior And the emotional signs that you were mentioning, more often than not, it's really people who know kids, know certain kids, and see a change happening for that child. So let's say you've got a kid. It could be a kid, like maybe you're a coach or you're a teacher. It's somebody a kid you see all the time. It could be your niece or your nephew or your own child, and their behavior starts to change. There's some, it doesn't mean they're being abused, sexually abused, but it means something's going on.
Something's going on.
It's a little bit of a red flag. You need to pay attention. You need to start having some questions and conversations. If they're afraid to go with someone, all of a sudden they don't want to go play baseball. They're not interested anymore. Ask a few more questions. If their grades are falling, if they're losing interest in things, their friends are changing.
True. Their friends are changing is a good sign, especially for teenagers.
Particularly for teenagers. Their eating habits change. Their way they clean themselves, either they stop cleaning themselves, hygiene, like taking showers, or they're obsessively cleaning themselves. That could also be a sign. So I have there's a list, like it's long. But the
depressions
idea,
and nightmares as well. And they say
exactly
for the younger children, they start bedwetting.
Exactly. So for younger children, like under age 10, if they go backwards and start bedwetting again, that's a red flag. But the first thing I always say to parents is, if your child starts bedwetting again and you don't see, the first thing you would always do, take them for an exam and make sure they don't have a urinary tract infection. Because a lot of people start bedwetting kids when they have a UTI.
Yes.
And we just sort of forget about that. But kids, boys and girls, can get UTI. So you have to rule things out, but you also have to have an open mind. Is there something else going on?
How can someone protect their child from sexual abuse? Is there a way? Because everybody have that little baby that you come out of the hospital with, and you just don't want to even imagine something bad happening. How can a parent protect their child from abuse?
It's really, I wish I could say there's a foolproof, way to do it. But what the best way is from a very young age to educate ourselves. What are the signs? What does an offender look like in our community or in our family? How do I talk about these things? All of these things are items that you can find more information on our website, from our parent page on our website. But it's also about being an approachable, available parent. And a lot of us culturally are excitable parents. And you gave a hint that you might have been an excitable parent when your child was young. And, a lot depends, and it's not just the Caribbean culture by any means, okay? So, but it goes back to, if your child came to you and said, Mama, I failed my math test. And you go, you what? You failed your math test? I'm going to punish you. You studied for that. What happened? Blah, 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 blah. That child's going to shrink back. They're not going to want to talk to you about anything anymore, and they're going to be afraid. And that was just about a math test. So how do I tell my mom that the babysitter's boyfriend was over and he touched my vagina and put his hands in my vulva? How am I supposed to tell you that if you can't even handle a math test? So what we teach is that we need to stay calmer as parents. And when our child tells us something important, I had a fight with a friend, blah, blah, whatever it is, I saw something on the internet, we need to breathe. We need to have a poker face, a calm, open face, which is very hard. Takes practice. And then we need to say, tell me more.
Yes, tell me more.
That's it. No judgment. No, you're in trouble. No, I'm taking away your iPad and your computer and all your other stuff. Because if they're telling you, then they did the right thing. Commend them. You did the right thing by coming to me. So it's changing how we parent And that takes practice.
So through awareness, preventive education, conversation, because it's not funny, but the predators are doing just that. They're
Oh,
aware,
yeah.
you know,
The other direction. Yep.
they prevent your child from reporting it, and they create that circle of trust for them to be able to do what they need to do.
To sneak in. Yep.
Yeah, just thinking.
Yeah.
So prevention, preventive education, awareness, and conversation.
Yeah.
Those are. Now tell us a little about the programs, and I would love to hear about the book before we wrap up.
Okay, sure. So our goal is to bring this education out into the community. We've been around since 2009 doing that.
Okay.
We sometimes use translators as well. So that is a possibility if someone it needs, we have a Spanish person on board, and we also have access to Haitian translators, and you probably could join me and we could do one together.
Yes, definitely.
For the community. I would love to do that with you.
Definitely.
So seminars, so that's seminars for adults. We can literally come to somebody's business and we could do a lunch and learn. People bring their lunches and we talk while they're eating. And then we have a conversation. So there's many, many ways. So that's one thing. Go to our website and get more resources on our website that we have for parents and we have for educators. And we have programming that goes into the school. So there's a mandate, there's a law in the state of Florida, but there's laws across the country that say this type of education has to be done kindergarten to age 12, to grade 12, excuse me. And we provide, KidSafe provides kindergarten through grade 5. And we have a very specific program that we can talk to people about and tell them how they can bring that program to their children's school. And it's free.
Awesome.
So it's all supported by your listeners and other people in the community who make donations to help keep this programming going in the community.
I'm going to encourage our community, and I'm going to encourage also our business owners within the Haitian American Chamber of Commerce to support your program. And I'll tell you, it's because it's twofold. As a Caribbean person, I realize that many Caribbeans do not have their legal documentation for a period of time while they have their children here. And oftentimes they don't report the abuse, and it trickles down from the parents to the child. So the parents usually would not report anything that goes wrong, and the child is saying this. So is your organization open to listen to those dolences of people who are undocumented?
Oh, I mean, of course. But there is a reality that I'd have to look it up in different areas, but anyone can report abuse, documented or undocumented. And there is a system in place to get those children safe and those people hopefully out of our community.
Yeah, because I think sometimes the predators, they lean on people that they know cannot report, just like they do for the children. So 100%. It's very important that whether you are documented, and I want to emphasize that, especially for the people from the Caribbean community listening, because they feel as though they don't have a voice.
Right. It makes them more vulnerable. Absolutely.
Please tell us your website. And it's also important that I mention that, because oftentimes Caribbean people say, oh, well, they really don't want to help us because they told us to go online. But here's what I don't understand. The predators are online with your children. So if you are not able to navigate the system and be online as well, you're going to lose the battle. You're going to lose the battle, because with the pandemic, most people were online. So I can only imagine. And they went up. I was going to say it. I was going to try to check with BSO and the other law enforcement authority to realize what happened, because now it was not even curbside. It was at home.
Yeah, exactly. So our website is educational. It's information. So we're encouraging parents to get involved and even ask us questions. We have a section, ask us a question, and I will answer you directly, right? So it's www.kid, KID, safe,
SAFE,
Mhm.
Foundation, FOUNDATION.org, ORG. KidSafeFoundation.org.
And one of the things that I really loved about your site is when I went to the site, it says because children are our most valuable resources and have the right to be safe. As a parent, if you bring a child on this earth, you need to understand that child has the right to be safe. And you have a whole village. You have people like Cherie, you have people like myself, and so many organizations that are there to help keep your child safe.
Amen.
I don't I don't want to sound, I don't want to sound like I was preaching. And I don't even want to ask you any last word until we meet again where we could tell the community more, because this was important because it's the month of April and we want to create the awareness. But the awareness is all year long. And we want to just take this month to emphasize on the fact that as a parent, you need to be educated. As a parent, you need to be aware. As a parent, you need to open the line of communication, not only with your children, but the people around you who are there to protect your children. Share something with us before we go.
I feel so blessed that you brought me on to your show. And I really want everybody to understand that this is an issue that affects everyone. It penetrates all of our communities, all of our countries across the world. There's nobody that is immune to child abuse. And the more we can do as a society in really making change, the safer the next generation is. And they are precious and they are our future.
Thank you so much, Cherie. It was a pleasure having you. I hope to have you again soon where we
Sure.
could talk more about the community. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much.